Red Bull and the RB20, which for my mind should have just been last year's car with new stickers on it. But you clearly have taken a deeper dive into it. What are your thoughts?
Well, so part of the reason that we delayed bringing out this video was because we wanted to make sure that the RB20 had been released as well, so we could at least give our views on that. And I think for this season, Red Bull, there's two aims here. There's a balance here between evolution and revolution. The RB9 team was all conquering at one race last season. So what do Red Bull really need to do? They just need to keep going, right? But the problem with doing that is that everybody else has seen what you've done and they can start to catch up, and the law of diminishing returns starts to kick in. So actually they need to rebel as well. They need a bit of revolution in their thinking, and maybe this is a bit conspiratorial, but I think they probably did need to deflect a little bit of attention away from what's going on within their team, and maybe that's played into why they've shown as much as they have on their car, and perhaps the spy shots that came out from their shakedown at Silverstone the day before also plays into that too. So they've so just like McLaren, I think were happy that they were shaking down on the same day as Mercedes, so they could hide what was going on at their launch. Red Bull have been forced a little bit by that, the spy shots that came out from the shakedown there, to reveal a bit more of their car. But it does deflect away from what's going on behind the scenes at Red Bull. So I think those are the two aims of the car here. And we know that Adrian Newey talked a lot about evolving the car, and he was a bit worried that just evolving the car might mean that other teams would be able to catch up. But actually, when you look at the car, it looks completely different. What did you think when you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, it does look completely different, and yet again, I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to seeing cars being launched or even at shakedowns and what they actually look like. I think that Red Bull are so well versed with playing the PR game around all of this, is that there's got to be a lot more to it than just the technicalities of this. So I have zero doubt in my mind that they already have something up their sleeve from last year. So I don't know if this is done on purpose to get the rest of us kind of going around in circles, and maybe more importantly, their competitors, right? To just sort of overthink certain things. They certainly find themselves in a position of strength where they can do that, right? They can play these mind games, and we know that Ferrari and Mercedes haven't had to take step backs and maybe even full resets in some cases. So I think it's great. I didn't find anything fairly remarkable from the Red Bull car, but I also didn't expect a whole lot new, right? Like they have been so dominant. I'd just be curious to see what car turns up in Bahrain now, because I just think that they're hiding a lot up their sleeves. I think you hit the nail on the head. For Red Bull going into the season, the game is not so much on the track as it is off track, right? And we're not here to speculate about anything, but I do think there's an impact of what has been happening with Red Bull's car launches, and there's been some interesting decisions being taken behind the scenes. So I find the car to be fascinating. I just don't believe that anyone will come close to beating them this year.
Yeah. And I think actually this car in particular is very, very interesting, because from everything that I've seen and everything that I've read, and actually just physically looking at the car, they could have just evolved it. You could have had a repeat of the RB19 where they took the wraps off it, and you would have been hard pressed to see the differences between the RB18 and the RB19. This car looks completely different.
It does. It does look different.
Whether what the car ultimately looks like on track bears any resemblance to what this car looks like, I don't know. But and they were clearly hiding a lot of interesting stuff. But it's really interesting to see that where everybody else has started to move towards a Red Bull RB19 style overbody aero, they've moved completely in the other direction. And just to highlight that, we've got a quick picture of last year's launch Mercedes and this year's launch RB20. What is going on? So
it's trolling.
Red,
that's what it is.
It is, isn't it? I mean, Adrian Newey has just gone, wait a second. You guys have been going on about this zero pod nonsense for 2 seasons. This is how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, Red Bull haven't turned up with a zero pod, but what they have done is at the front of the car they've got a big underbite, right? So they again, like Mercedes last season, have incorporated the side impact structure into the top half of their side pod. So you've got a big overhang. But they've kept the sort of wider side pod, so you've still got a big side pod undercut. It's not a zero pod in the sense that there is a side pod there, but like the Mercedes, it looks like there's a vertical inlet. Now, whether or not that's actually feeding air to the rest of the radiators, or whether it's an S duct being a small inlet that then has an outlet somewhere else. I don't know, and there's been talk about there being 2 separate inlets, and but whatever they are, they look like they're tiny. They've got very small inlets, which is what Mercedes were championing for the past 2 seasons. So interesting. And then they've got these big elephant trunks at the top of the car, and whether or not that's because they've shrink wrapped everything around the radiators and the turbo cooling, and it's meant that you've got a really tiny waist and then a big elephant trunk, a la the Mercedes of last year. I don't know. Or whether this is all completely fake and we're going to see something completely different when the car comes out in Bahrain. Who the hell knows? But it does go to show that actually all of the stuff, the paraphernalia at the top of the car is subservient to what's happening underneath the car.
Mm-hmm.
And the floor is the most important thing. It's the one thing on the Red Bull that we can't see. We can infer things about the floor edge, but we can't because they've hidden it. So we can't see the thing that we needed to be able to see. We can't see the floor edge. You can see even on the picture that we've got shown here, it's blanked out. And from what I hear at the launch, the rear of the car was really well hidden. So whenever anyone wanted to look at the car and take photos, they weren't able to. And there was a wall of people standing at the rear of the car to stop people looking at the diffuser, the most important part of the car. So we can't see clearly what the rear end of the car, the beam wing and the diffuser actually look like. And we're going to have to wait for Bahrain pre-season testing to see what that looks like. And it's going to be super interesting when we do. So I think Red Bull played an absolute blinder in that they've shown a car that looks completely different to what it did last year and actually moves in certain ways further towards what Mercedes had been doing. But actually, the really important bits of the car they've hidden and we don't know. So they've deflected attention away from what was going on in the background politically at Red Bull by showing this car. But have still hidden the bits that they don't want us to see. Brilliant.
The only thing I love about car launches is the stuff that you just mentioned, like a bunch of people covering the floor, and we're not going to get to see it. And I love this part, right? This is why you got to love Formula One, right? And I think this is my personal opinion. Red Bull have done this basically to misguide everyone. Like they're actually hiding everything underneath the floor. I'd put my money on Adrian Newey having found something in the floor to make their car go even faster, better, all of the above, right? And what they're doing here is they're just showing. I mean, part of this is just that to troll Mercedes, right? Like, hey, we'll show you how to do a zero pod. Like, let's and look, hey, if everything is in the floor as we believe it is, right? It would be amazing to see Red Bull show up with this car in Bahrain and win. And then, I don't know, 2 races later, they bring in last year's concept, if we want to call that, right? And then show up there. Now they're just like, hey, which car do you want us to use? Like, okay, Checo, you get this one. Max, you get, okay, fine, let's just do it. Hey, while we're at it, we'll even give Visa Cash App RB a concept there too. Here you go. Here you take that. And I can't wait for AlphaTauri or WeCarb to be fighting for podiums next year too, because Adrian Newey is run out of of space to keep creating and making this even better, like as if there was some way to do that. I think you're spot on with this. I think that given everything that Red Bull has been going through, I think they put this up and they've hidden a lot more than they've shown. I think that's probably the best way to put it. And I think it's all there in the floor that we'll
Smoke
never
and
miss.
mirrors.
Yeah.
Smoke and mirrors, Amar. I think
All we have to hope for is Checo crashing the car somewhere where we can see the floor again.
see it, exactly. And late enough in the season that everybody else can
They're like, yeah,
can
okay.
copy something relevant.
They're gonna hit us with more aha moments. Yeah, yeah. Yep. Yeah. So we've done a good job of breaking these up. Do you wanna close us out with some closing thoughts?
Well, I thought, what better way to finish this than Amar? What order do you think these four cars are going to finish in at the end of the season?
I have no idea, man. I have no idea. I haven't even given it much thought. And the only thing that I would say for sure is I don't see Red Bull getting beat this year. Like it's just really hard. I mean, stranger things have happened, and stuff's happening, and there's got to be an impact outside. But just looking at what the car is, and it does seem like a dream, right? To drive for anyone, let alone be Max. It's hard to see Max being beaten in any way, shape, or form. But I'm gonna put my head over my heart and say that I think that McLaren will be firmly in the mix with Red Bull, at least earlier on. I don't know what happens with Mercedes and Ferrari because they just seem like they're so conceptually different than what has been done in the past, and just no way to correlate what's happened in the past. So if I had to pick, I'd go Red Bull, McLaren. I don't know, tied for third between the other two.
Yeah.
What about you?
Okay. I agree with you. I think Red Bull have are the only ones that haven't really had to fundamentally change their entire concept, right? They've already got the suspension and they've already got the aero platform that works. So I think they are just trolling, and I think they will have more than enough in hand. And they stopped developing their car at the end of last season. Everything to focus on this car, which is then going to be next year's car too. So I think Red Bull are going to be ahead. But all of the other teams have had logical, although they've come with massive changes, Mercedes especially. I think all of the developments and everything that they've come out with, there've been clear aims that we've talked about and clear reasons for why they've done what they've done. So you'd expect a step forward from all of those teams. Whether that's going to be enough to bridge the gap, I don't think so. But I do think that those three teams will be close. And again, if there isn't a big fight with Red Bull, which I hope there will be, there will at least be a really tight battle amongst the following three. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are the three that will be fighting it out. I think Aston Martin might get in there as well, but I don't have the same confidence in them. Given that, I don't have the same confidence in them that I do in Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren.
I think the wild card in all of this is what happens with Checo and how he drives, right? Because I don't think the drivers' championship is in question. I think you can reasonably expect there to be a battle for the constructors' championship if one of these other teams manages to put, consistent podiums, for example, right? And Checo manages to struggle somehow, some way, doesn't make it to a podium, or as he's had so many DNFs last year. If that comes in the mix, then I think Max can be threatened, right? Because it's hard to see that first place being given up, but I think everything else is slightly up for grabs there.
I think actually that's really important, and again something ominous, because one of the most interesting quotes I heard in this preseason was Pierre Wash, the head of aero at Red Bull, saying that he thought the RB19 had failed because only one of its drivers was able to extract performance out of it. Hi, everyone. So just as we hit send on our big 2024 launches video, we got a little peek at this article, which sounds like chaos. Red Bull are going to go full zero pod. Amara, what do you make of that?
This is mind blowing, right? Like, and we did kind of sort of. I did at the time. I looked like an idiot, but I don't anymore, right? Like, this is a classic troll job of Red Bull saying, "Hey, Mercedes, look how we're going to do the zero pods, and we're going to do it much better than you." Like, this is This is the ultimate, the LOL, right? Like it really is. I think it's mind blowing. Look, I would still say this. I'll maintain that it's a little bit hard for me to buy into this right now until I see the car hit the track in a few days now, right? But if this is meant to be true, then that would just be epic. And I think the 2024 season just got very, very interesting in my mind. So, what do you think?
Yeah, right. Yeah, very similar. I think I think the first thing is this is absolutely nuts. Uh, but a few thoughts went through my head when I read it. The first is that it 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 probably validates Mercedes' choice to stick with the zero pod into 2023. Although I guess they didn't really understand why they were doing it. But the fundamental search for peak downforce wasn't completely misguided, I think. But why is it that the Adrian Newey and Red Bull think that they can do something that has vexed Mercedes for 2 seasons? And I guess my answer to that, again, as it always does in this rule set, comes back to the mechanical and aero platforms. So Adrian Newey prioritized consistent downforce in the 2022 car over peak downforce. And they've now had 2 years where they've had a nice stable mechanical platform that's allowed a nice consistent aero map um, across all of the races that we've been to on the calendar, and it's been super successful, more successful than everybody else who have all chased peak downforce. And I think Adrian Newey has now kind of thought, look, I've got I've got my I've got my mechanical platform sorted, and I've got consistent downforce, and I know that works. So now I can start chasing peak downforce, and and I'll be safe in the knowledge that the mechanical platform I've got is going to be stable enough to exploit that and actually get the numbers that Mercedes thought that they were going to see on this on the track based on their simulator. Red Bull, I think, now have the tools, all of them, to actually make that work. And the big caveat to this is that none of this might work. It might be that Red Bull have exactly the same problems. So come sort of Japan, which is when I think they're going to introduce the full zero pod. If the car is bouncing and porpoising like a mad thing, then I will have to revisit my thoughts on this. But you based on past performance, you'd expect that Adrian Newey kind of knows what he's doing, and the whole aero group at Red Bull know what they're doing. So you'd expect it to work, and I think that's my reason for thinking that it will.
So I'm going to take my skeptic hat off for a second. I'm going to assume that if Adrian Newey puts this together, that there will be something to it. But in reality, even if it doesn't work, this is like them trying another concept where they can just go back to, whatever they have right now, which is just fine, right? So this is a little bit of tinkering around and really just playing gamesmanship in some ways. But if this zero pod ends up working, can you imagine? Let's just go back a few weeks, a few months rather, and look at all the turmoil that Mercedes went through. I mean, we had to start questioning everything, the personnel changes they made, right? Mike Elliott, James Allison, that whole fiasco slash saga, Lewis Hamilton leaving, right? In part because of all the challenges that they've had. And if Red Bull nails it, like the rest of the grid is just going to look like a bunch of idiots. Like we're just like this has massive implications, not necessarily for Red Bull because they do have it in the bag, so to speak. But I think this is massive for Mercedes, really.
Yeah, but I think it goes back to the fact that the side pods was
Right,
overplayed, was
right.
massively overplayed because
Absolutely.
it was never about the side pods. And Mike Elliott constantly said it's not about the side pods, it's not about the side pods. And kind of nobody really listened to him. Um, on the outside anyway. But I still think that what Mercedes have done is the correct move. Like they've changed their mechanical platform because if they had carried on with let's just do the zero pods, and we don't actually know what's going to happen, what Mercedes are going to bring to the second test at Bahrain like they did in 2022. Because lest we forget, in Barcelona 22, they came with a full side pod setup and then had no side pods in the second test. I mean, I don't know
True,
that Mercedes are
true,
not going to
true,
do that. They
true.
haven't said that they're not.
No.
Um, but the smart thing here was to do what Red Bull have done and have a stable mechanical platform to allow consistent downforce, and then you can start chasing peak downforce once you know that that works. Um, I don't think you can miss that step, which is what everyone thought they could do, and
Right.
they're now sort of 24 months behind.
But
It's a
yeah,
problem.
so absolutely correct, right? But take a step back from all of this, right? Let's rise above the technicalities. You're absolutely correct. Red Bull have nailed this in every which way, right? There is no arguing that. Mechanical grip, aero, everything. I mean, there's, outside of not figuring out, the fuel issue in the first race in Bahrain, I mean, there's really nothing to pick apart, right? But let's look at this from the Mercedes standpoint, right? If Red Bull really nailed this, what does this say about how Mercedes has been running business and its work for the last couple of years? It just doesn't make sense. So even if they come back, yes, the current concept makes sense. It just feels like they're 2 years too late to it. So if they're going to nail this now, we're somehow going to have to expect them to maybe bring the zero pods back, and figure this out. But the reality is all of this is relative in terms of performance. And there is a timing issue to all of this, right? It's a question of when you nail this and put all of this together. And just from a project management standpoint, this seems to be an epic failure on their part. Like there's no other way to put it around this. Maybe they didn't have a genius like Adrian Newey to start these new regulations with, and it seems like that's really come to bite them in the back again.
Yeah, but I mean, we already knew that they had a massive balls up. That's why they sacked that's why their technical director was swapped round and James Allison came back. So
Yeah.
I mean that's already happened. That ship has already sailed.
No.
And we know they made mistakes. They know they made mistakes. They know they're behind. That's why the car that has been released this week is completely different to the one that was out a year ago.
Yeah, I
And yes,
completely agree with you, but this is like a reminder of your mistakes, right? Like how many times have we had this in life where you've done something wrong or sort of incorrect years ago, and this is Red Bull like really rubbing it in. Like I mean this, and I agree with you. I think it'd be amazing to see if this works. I have no earthly idea if they're actually going to show up with the zero pods or if they're not. But even the fact that they're doing this right now, I think is really smart and cheeky on their part. I mean, it deviates from a lot, but it does create a lot of intrigue in the
Well,
season,
I
right?
think,
Because that's
well, I
what we're going
do.
to be looking for.
Well, in this segment, what we talked about was the balance between evolution and revolution, right?
Right.
And to me, this is Adrian Newey and the technical department at Red Bull thinking, if we stick with what we have, this just going for consistent
Yeah.
downforce, they're going to catch us. So we have to do something to get even quicker because, like we keep saying, that law of diminishing returns will hit them at some point. But this suggests that actually the potential performance ceiling for this car is much higher
Yeah.
than what we have
Absolutely.
previously thought.
Absolutely.
And that I think is a big, big worry for the quality of racing in 2024
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
2025.
Absolutely.
So there you go.
I couldn't agree with you
That's
more. Yeah,
my
that's great.
that's
Yeah.
my worry.
Yeah. No, that's your worry, but look, this is yet another reason to be excited about this season, right? Like if we walked into the season knowing what the ultimate outcome is, and there's no doubt that Red Bull and Max are the favorites, but there is so much intrigue now, and this just adds a next level intrigue to those of us that really want to absorb, the sort of the technicalities of the sport too, right? And this is just amazing. I still can't. Again, I'm 50-50 on this, whether they're actually going to follow through with this or this is just more of a cat and mouse kind of game, right? And then also, like, how many of these other teams, right? I mean, McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes are looking around and saying, well, do we need to change our development plans? Like, are Red Bull onto something? And I think a lot of it is also I think to some level is designed to throw people off their games a little bit, because you can't help but think about it. Maybe you don't if you're these other teams, you say no, okay, we're going to stick with what we have and move forward. But I can't imagine. I think Mercedes is going in there. They're tempted to be thinking. I mean, I would love to have been a fly on the wall when when Red Bull released this car, and then subsequently all the reports that have come out and be like, hey, what's going on over there?
Yeah,
I would
right.
love to be there.
Well, we'll
Um,
see if by mid-season everyone got a zero pod
yeah,
on. We'll have to relook at our evaluation of what Mercedes were doing in 22, 23. But I think, as I say, it just highlights the fact that this is a classic case of what you can see isn't necessarily the problem. It's the stuff that you can't see
can't see.
that's
Right.
causing it.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I can't wait to do one of those, we thought we knew it all, but we didn't know anything segments in the future. Looking forward to
Yeah,
that.
there'll be plenty of those.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. We're going to have a few more of these breakdowns over the course of this week, and we'll see you in the next one.